The story begins near the Demon Lord's castle. A huge explosion was recorded near the castle while a battle was being fought. Soon enough, the Demon Lord itself was seen down on the ground, done for good. Even the people, the valiant heroes who had taken him out, found it hard to believe what they had achieved. Back in the royal capital, this was a moment of celebration for everyone. After all, the 4 hero sages had taken out the mighty Demon Lord. A large banquet was thrown by the king as a means to celebrate. For one of the sages, this was huge. On one side, the place was filled with nobles and royalty from other nations. On the other side, the place had every type of food and liquor one could hope for. As someone coming from a modest family, this was both heaven and hell for him. However, when he, along with the other sages, step inside the room, they are greeted with thunderous applause. The king labels the 4 sages as heroes and thanks them for saving humanity from the hands of the Demon Lord. He acknowledged all 4 heroes, the Sage of Earth, the Sage of Water, the Sage of Fire, and finally, the Sage of Wind, who comes from a modest family. As a way to acknowledge their contributions and valor even further, the king grants them the status of the 4 emperors, the highest rank a mage can obtain. This stuns the Wind Sage, as the emperor is a big moniker. It is usually only given to the ones coming from the noblemost backgrounds. They've been granted this title because of their hard work in fighting and defeating the Demon Lord. So, they now hold a lot of influence within the kingdom, as the emperor is a big title. The crowning ceremony commences, as the king starts going through the sages. He crowns the Fire Sage as emperor, giving him the new name of Emperor Blazesoul. After that, he moves his attention to the Wind Sage, Eftel, and calls for him. Eftel, nervous, quickly steps forward and bows down to the king. The king bestows upon him the title of emperor and gives him sovereign authority over mages. He hopes for Eftel to use his influence for the greater good. He picks up the crown and puts it on Eftel's head, naming him Emperor Stormgale. When he is crowned, Eftel is hit with a truckload of emotions. He couldn't believe that he was an emperor and cries while thanking the king. The king then asks for the hall for an extended applause for the 4 emperors. The room quickly breaks out in chants, wishing for the long lives of the 4 emperors. With tears in his eyes, this was the greatest moment of Eftel's life. He walked through the thunderous cheers as all the hard work, the 40 years of dedication to the craft of magic, it had all been paid back, and he was rewarded appropriately. This was more than what he had ever hoped for in life. 15 years later, Lord Eftel is now a respected figure. One day he was helping out people with their work. They thanked him for the guidance he provided. Eftel tells them to continue before he focuses on his own research. He kept on traveling and researching, noting down the littlest of things. However, at one point he started coughing up blood. This was a sign of him getting the demon's disease. He wondered if his time was coming to an end. This is when a girl named Merlin came up to him looking concerned. Lord Eftel was shocked by her being there. Merlin asks him why he continues to dedicate his life to this research. What exactly is the purpose for him to do it? Eftel asks her if she is worried for him, to which she says yes. This hits Eftel hard, as he recalls the events from 15 years ago. They had burnt the demon's castle, and things were falling apart thanks to it. Eftel was about to evacuate the place, when he saw a demon mother holding onto a demon child. The demon pleaded for Eftel to take her child, Merlin, and save her from the wrath. Eftel felt overwhelmed and took her in. That is when he started raising Merlin. He feels guilty of the fact that he was one of the key figures who wiped out Merlin's race, yet she cares so much about him. Merlin wanted to hug Eftel, but he stops her and tells her that the reason why he keeps researching is because he has talented and nice disciples he has to pass the legacy on to. That's why he decides to research as much as he does. Merlin gets confused, so Eftel explains that he did it because he had the hopes of his disciples and subordinates on his shoulder. He also added that if one wants to master magic, they must always try to reach the pinnacle and discover things that have never been discovered. Merlin, naturally, was still confused by what he meant. So, Eftel explains that he once wanted to reach the top as well, but over time, he has realized that he is not good or strong enough for it. This shocked Merlin, as she refused to accept his way of thinking. After all, Eftel is one of the strongest magicians in the kingdom. He is Emperor Stormgaze after all. Eftel admits that he indeed is very strong, but that is when he is compared to normal human beings. However, when put against the very best like the other three sages, he pales in comparison. He also struggled during the Demon War despite being the oldest and most experienced, when the rest of sages carried. This is when an informant comes running in with a major news update. The guy informs Eftel that Emperor Blazesoul has somehow gone ahead and accomplished it. He has invented a proper theory which gives an accurate representation of one's magical aptitude. This shocks Eftel as this is a huge deal. Having this ability means to understand what someone's magic aptitude is. This is something other magicians have tried to figure out for all of their lives. Eftel reads the manual and this confirms it for him. He is sure that the method works and is impressed by Emperor Blazesoul's achievement, calling him one of a kind. Excited, Eftel suggests they go to their household and check it themselves. At home, they set up the 4 tubes with the required solution, as suggested by the guidebook. There, they decide to test Merlin's abilities first. As instructed, 4 hair strands are taken from the one being tested and put into the tube solution. After a while, the blue and green tubes were shining brightly. This excited everyone, as they wondered what it meant. Eftel checks the instructions provided by Blazesoul and discovers that the blue and green signs stand for water and wind, respectively. The book also says that the amount of glow the tubes generate indicates how good one is at the element. After extensive inspection, he comes to the conclusion that Merlin is S-ranked in both water and wind elements. As for the brown and red elements, it indicates that she is B-ranked in earth and C-ranked in fire. This amazes Eftel, as her ranking was truly impressive. Merlin didn't understand it herself, but Eftel knew how strong she was from raising her. He also fully trusts the research done by Blazesoul for this. He sees this as an improvement over the current system used by schools. At school, kids are taught spells from each of the 4 elements. They have to learn everything for a decade after they are finally allowed to take an aptitude test, from which their main ability comes out. This is too time-consuming. However, with his methods, students can learn about their abilities before they even start school, or heck, they can learn about it when they're born. This will make training so much better for them, and they'll be able to become much better sages. After this, Eftel says he wants to test his own abilities. Merlin says there is no need for him to check that because he is one of the 4 great emperors after all. But others insisted that they do check it, because they wanted to see just how much glow could a legend like Eftel create. Eftel sits down for it, as he tells them to take her hair and start the procedure. The kids were excited and expected some huge flash of light from the man himself. In reality, Eftel has always been curious. He wondered if he ever had the talent and ability to topple his great fellow emperor. He dedicated his life to studying and practicing magic. He also knows that the other guys probably worked very hard too, but he doubts that anyone in history has worked as hard as he did. However, the results that came out were shocking. The tubes were colorless. This stunned Eftel. The kids read the guidebook and learned that if someone's tubes come out as colorless, it means they're not particularly good at anything. This was unbelievable for Eftel, who couldn't believe that he is absolutely talentless. No way could a legendary mage like him be good for nothing. The kids wonder if this happened because they messed up something during the testing and decide to check again. Eftel thinks this might be the case as well. However, no matter how much they tried, the result came out the same. In pure disappointment, Eftel falls sick and becomes bedridden as a result. Merlin was obviously worried for the man who raised her, but even at his worst stage, Eftel could only think about what happened. He always wondered why he couldn't reach his peers. He worked harder than anyone else and dedicated his whole life to magic. However, now he knows why it did not. It is because he was talentless all along. He thinks about his past and how he has been in many great battles. He was on the verge of losing, but always managed to escape and survive. He was so caught up in these battles that he never got a chance to explore himself and learn that he was not good enough. He always survived and did what he could, but it wasn't enough. The fellow sages always did better than him and left him trailing far behind. They're the real chosen ones, and they deserve to be on top of the magic realm, not him. He is a pitiful person who is not good at anything, yet he spent his entire life studying something, dreaming pipe dreams, hoping he could be the best when he could not. His heart pain doubles, as he calls himself a talentless fool, and succumbs to the pain after a while. Suddenly, the skill of reincarnation activates, as he is brought to a different realm. There, Eftel remembers that he had this skill. It had been 50 years since he began living life as Eftel, so he forgot that he even had this skill in the first place. He had obtained this skill in his previous life before becoming Eftel. The goddess who granted him this skill comes down and says that it has been a while since they last met. She adds that she was surprised to see Eftel making it through such a tough life, even though it eventually took his life. She thinks his perseverance came from the unbearable will skill she gave him. Eftel understands that it was probably the skill that made him unable to give up on dreams and hopes. The goddess then says that it's now time for Eftel's second reincarnation. She has prepared everything and asked Eftel what additional skill he would like to take to the new world. She suggested accelerated growth. However, Eftel says he doesn't need anything because he already has what he needs in his head. The goddess is impressed by his attitude and praises him for becoming one of the 4 emperors on sheer hard work. She tells him that everything he had achieved in that world was thanks to his own effort, and he deserves all the credit for it. Eftel asks the goddess if she is trying to flatter him or something. The goddess then informs him that the next reincarnation location has been selected. She tells him it is time to go. Eftel thanks her, and the goddess wishes him best of luck on his journey before reincarnating him. After this, Eftel wakes up in a new body, and his mind is hit with thousands of memories. Eftel panics, but he soon realizes who he is. He understands that he was born into this world, but his memories from his past life weren't made available to him until now. He feels happy to have another shot at life, and this time vows to become the best. He then quickly prepares a few things before getting ready to take the magic aptitude test. Turns out it was the same as before, nothing. He didn't expect anything better, because he did end up saying no to the goddess for assistance skills. Eftel then goes to the nearby hill to rest, as he ponders whether or not his life will stay the same as the previous one. He thought that his life will be useless again if he ends up hitting his limit after a certain point, and ends up being second again. Just then, a dragon flies above and past him. Eftel understands that it is a furious dragon, and starts heading for the city to protect it. Soon, he realizes that he is no longer Eftel the sage, but just a 4-year-old boy. He regrets not at least taking an early bloomer skill to learn how to do magic before. As the royal knights fail to take on the dragon, they see it heading for the nation's capital. Eftel wishes he could use magic he learnt from previous life. He casually tries doing it, but it somehow ends up working and hitting the dragon. This shocks everyone, as the burning dragon starts flying towards Eftel. Scared, Eftel didn't know what to do, but the dragon fell near him and accepted defeat. Eftel realizes that he can still use the skills he learned in the previous world, despite being a 4-year-old kid. 3 years to buy, and we see that Eftel is always studying to get better knowledge of things. As time goes by, he has understood that he has been reborn in the same world as the previous life, and this is just 400 years after the passing of Eftel the sage. One day, a man comes to visit Eftel and his mother, and gives her some money, and tells her to spend it however she likes. We learn that Eftel is still called Eftel here, and that he lives alone with his mother. Like him, his mother is talentless, and the man who gave her money is his elder brother, Fraser Alcott. He is the second son of the family. Eftel is part of a ducal line, with his ancestors being dukes. Eftel asks his brother about their father and where he was. Fraser tells him that their father is a busy man, and that he can't come to see them because of that. Eftel's father is a well-known man. He is the Duke of Alcott. He has 1 official wife, and has 9 other concubines including Eftel's mother. Because of the fact that his mother has no talent, the other concubines were troubled by her. They didn't want to share their man with a woman who doesn't know magic, so they kicked her out. As for Eftel, because he has no talent either, they treated him like an illegitimate child. Because of this, they now live away from their family, in a remote place that is far away from the kingdom. However, His brother Fraser couldn't handle seeing the injustice against them, so he occasionally visits them to make sure they're doing well and tries to help them out. Fraser tells Eftel that he will tell their father about him. He also asks Eftel if he needs something, but Eftel tells him that he already does enough. Eftel then goes to prepare tea for Fraser. He doesn't really feel bothered with everything stacked against him, because Eftel knows that if he studies magic, he can make a legacy for himself. While having tea, Fraser asks Eftel what he wants to be in the future. Eftel very enthusiastically tells him about his aspirations to be a mage and going to the Royal Magic Academy. However, his mother closes his mouth, shutting him up. She says that she knows that Eftel is just as hopeless when it comes to magic as her. Nowadays, it has become common for everyone to use Emperor Blaisal's method to check magical aptitude. Everyone uses it, so it's normal for his mother to know about his talentlessness. After this, Eftel's mother expresses her intention of enrolling Eftel into a military swordsmanship school. Fraser loves that idea, as he reveals that he also went to a military swordsmanship college and graduated from there. His decision wasn't made on rationality, though. He was having a rebellious period, so he didn't want to follow his father's footsteps. Hence, he chose that program. However, he doesn't regret it and thinks it is one of his best decisions, because now he stands on his own. Following this, Fraser says that he is free today, so if they wants, he can teach some basics of swordsmanship to Eftel. Eftel's mother couldn't be more excited and tells Fraser to teach her son. Afterwards, they practice outside of the house, and Fraser praises Eftel for being quite good at swinging swords. Eftel doesn't like doing this, but he sees what Fraser's intentions were. He was worried about Eftel and what he would do in the future, so he wants to guide him and help him be something. He appreciates that gesture, but he wants to be a mage. So during break time, Eftel tells Fraser that he really wants to be a mage and go to Magic Academy. Fraser feels bad, but he goes forward and tells Eftel that there are things people are good at, and there are things that they are not good at. Eftel is aware of that, but he thinks the academy must have made some improvements which would allow him to move past his shortcomings. Fraser then tells Eftel that if he is really so insistent about doing this, then he has to copy a spell Fraser will do and perform a magic skill. Even if he manages to do it imperfectly, Fraser will recommend him to the Magic Academy. Eftel is up for the challenge, but Fraser feels bad about this. But he has to show the harsh reality of the world to Eftel to make him change his mind. Fraser starts chanting spells to ask the wind gods to help him perform a trick. Eftel is shocked by the fact that he needs to chant his spells. Fraser eventually executes a wind-cutting technique, which cuts down a nearby tree. Fraser is proud of himself and thought he must have impressed Eftel, but Eftel thought it was underwhelming. Shocked, Fraser says that it might have looked easy, but it was a second-tier magic skill. Eftel, without even needing to chant a spell, uses a fourth-tier spell to destroy several trees in the forest. This stuns Fraser, as a 7-year-old shouldn't be able to do it. Not to mention, he did it without chanting, which is supposed to be something that only the 4 emperors could do. Fraser asks Eftel about it, so Eftel apologizes as he forgot to copy him directly. He says that he mistakenly used a 4th-tier magic skill. This stuns Fraser even more. Eftel adds that his body is still adapting to his knowledge, and that if he was in peak form, even a 10th-tier magic skill is no big deal for him. This leaves Fraser baffled, as 10th-tier skills are supposed to be stuff of folklore. The shock makes Fraser faint. Eftel quickly attends to him. He wonders why Fraser got so shocked by this. Eftel also recalls when he took out the dragon when he was 4, people were acting like it was a miracle, and that the gods must have struck it down. He realizes that something must be wrong about the world. After some further studying, Eftel comes to the conclusion that over the last 4 centuries, the quality of magic has declined severely for some reason. He makes a chart of magic tiers, comparing the present to the past. What was once considered beginner level is now considered medium to high level magic. And stuff like tier 9 and tier 10 are considered impossible to do now, but these were things the 4 emperors could do by themselves, and other mages could do in groups. The current world doesn't even know about tier X, but it existed in the past, and the 4 emperors could do it in a group ritual. Not to mention, he did all of those things without chanting spells. Considering all these things, Eftel understands why his brother fainted. After all, he saw a 7-year-old talentless kid churn out high-tier magic without chanting. So, when Frazier eventually wakes up, he quickly questions Eftel about his skills. However, Eftel lies about no such thing happening. Instead, he says that Frazier got hit by a tree branch that ricocheted back from his own magic strike. This makes more sense to Frazier, and he calms down. Afterwards, the two brothers start training more frequently. Eftel had no intention of joining the military school, but he played along with it for now. As they practiced, Eftel started getting good, and he even managed to push back Frazier at times. However, Frazier would use Eftel's momentum against him and make him fall over. He was just that food. Eftel didn't really like swordsmanship, but maybe it was his stubborn nature from the past life, but he just couldn't accept a defeat here too. So he kept on wanting to fight with his brother. They kept on doing this over and over again, with Eftel coming up short each time. Just like that, 3 years passed by quickly, and now Eftel stood as a 10-year-old. Eftel has massively improved as well, which is put on showcase when he breaks and slices through rocks, tree trunks, and other things with his sword. Eftel unexpectedly got invested in the art of swordsmanship. It had nothing to do with magic, but it was fun. He also thought it was a useful art, which he can use to overcome his magical shortcomings and become a magician swordsman. Just then, Frazier calls out to him. Eftel thought this was going to be another sparring session, as they now do sparring sessions 3 days a week. However, Frazier reveals that today, Eftel is going to spar with the former commander of Knights of the Azza Kingdom, Mariah. The guy is a giant, so he obviously intimidates Eftel. He knows that the guy is very strong. Mariah tells Eftel to attack him however he wants, and even shows him his back to make him confident. But Eftel knew that he was more than covered up, so it wouldn't be wise. The guy asks Eftel if he will just stand there forever, because he didn't come here to stand. Eftel wanted to move, but his feet didn't allow him. However, Mariah decides to take the initiative himself and attacks first. Eftel is stunned by his speed, but he somehow manages to block the attack. Eftel is pushed back, as Mariah taunts him for being weak. Eftel decides to show him what he is made of, so he attacks him with mana augmentation, which enhances Eftel's strength and speed. The result shows Eftel pushing back Mariah. The guy is impressed and tells Frazier that Eftel is good enough to get a recommendation. Eftel is confused, but Frazier is proud. He says that he noticed that Eftel has gotten good at controlling mana during fights. Frazier taught him earlier to use mana augmentation to strengthen himself. Even though it is a momentary boost, it can be helpful, so he taught Eftel how to do it. Frazier says that being untalented at magic doesn't mean one can't use magic, and praises Eftel's mana control. He compares his skills to a mature sage. Eftel feels cocky, as he was a sage after all. However, this just makes Mariah laugh, as he doesn't see what's so special about a kid who can control his mana but has no talent. This angers Eftel, as he knew that he could one-shot the guy if he wanted to. But he didn't want to win that way, so he jumps up and twists to generate more power before attacking Mariah with the sword. Mariah blocks it and calls Eftel weak again. He then pushes down his sword on Eftel's to gain a better position. He kept on mocking him and points out how the fight was already lost due to the size difference between them to rile up Eftel. Meanwhile, Eftel uses his wit to flick up his sword, disarming both himself and Mariah in the process. This shocks Mariah, as Eftel wastes no time to close the distance between him and Mariah, and uses a judo throw to slam down the huge man to claim his victory. This shocked Mariah, while Frazier celebrated enthusiastically. Eftel was a bit shocked by what he had done, before he quickly remembered something. He remembers that he used to be a judo practitioner in the life he lived before becoming Eftel the Sage. So he must have picked up the skill from there. That being said, he was amazed by the fact that he could still call back on skills he learned about 2 lifetimes ago. After this, Mariah gets up and states that he had heard about close contact fighters existing in the East, but he didn't expect to run into one today, especially not a 10-year-old. Despite that, he acknowledges Eftel's brilliance and accepts his defeat in the duel. He also says that Eftel has passed the test. Eftel was confused by this, as he didn't know what it meant. This is when Frasier reveals that Mariah is currently the headmaster of the military school. So this was basically Eftel's test, and from now on, he must refer to Mariah as headmaster. This stuns Eftel, as Frasier reveals that Eftel has booked himself a spot in the military school, and that he starts attending when he is 15. He can make his mother proud through this. Mariah also tells Eftel to not get cocky, because while he lost the duel today, Mariah is still the better fighter. Eftel didn't get the logic, but he was more concerned about how his plans had been messed up for good. For more years into the future, it was quite a rainy day, as it seemed like a storm was approaching. Frasier came to meet Eftel, but saw that he was not there. He asked Eftel's mother if he was still training in the rain, to which she confirmed his doubts. They both were worried about his well-being. Meanwhile, Eftel was training deep in the hills. He uses the legendary 10th tier magic skill called the Eftel, and it successfully registers. This ends up making a huge blast and makes a hole in the middle of the place. Even though it worked out fine, Eftel still wasn't satisfied with the results, as he noticed that even now, his spells and the magic actually working has a big latency issue. Although he was glad that it was a rainy day, because thanks to that, he can practice all the high-tier magic skills without catching anyone's eyes. Just then, Frasier comes running and finds Eftel, leaving him surprised and appalled. Frasier was worried because he had just heard a loud explosion, so he asked Eftel if he was okay. Eftel assures him that he is fine, and that there's not even a scratch on him. This relieves Frasier, but he still tells Eftel to not be so reckless and train in dangerous conditions. After all, he is supposed to be going to the military college next year, so he must keep himself safe and healthy. This reminds Eftel of his imminent, but undesired future. He has to go to the military college because he has a spot locked there after he defeated Mariah previously. Eftel isn't stoked about it, but this is the rule of the world. Whenever a kid turns 15 years old, they are considered a young adult and must venture out of the care of their family. They must then start to carve out their own legacy. The same thing will happen to him next year, but he doesn't want to go to military college. He wants to join the Magic Academy, but he knows that joining the Magic Academy will be tough for a talentless kid like him. Despite that, Eftel is determined to work hard and prove himself to everyone before joining the Magic Academy next year. Right then, Frasier says that he has some big news for Eftel. Back at Eftel's home, Frasier lets Eftel know that his father wants to meet him. This made his mother really happy, as she tears up. Finally, her son was recognized, and she couldn't thank Frasier enough for helping Eftel so much. She also overenthusiastically hugs Eftel, saying that she is proud of him. Eftel wasn't so keen on meeting the man who never once paid attention to him in 14 years. He tells his mother to get off him because she was suffocating him. Frasier also tears up unexpectedly, and Eftel's mother thanks him endlessly for taking care of them. This made Eftel realize that these two were his real family, and that he wants to make them happy. Afterwards, they go to Duke Olcott's residence. Both Eftel and his mother are amazed by the place. Eftel only decided to meet his father because of Frasier and his mother. But now that he was here, he was sort of excited. They enter the castle and are amazed by how great the place was. Eventually, they go over to the Duke's room, where Frasier introduces Eftel to his father. Eftel enthusiastically goes ahead and greets his father like a son. However, his father makes it clear that he should refer to him as Duke Olcott. After all, Eftel is an illegitimate son, and he has brought nothing but shame to the Olcott name. This hits Eftel hard. But his father goes on about how he can't believe that a descendant of Emperor Stormgale's bloodline is talentless. He thinks the Emperor would have been in tears had he known about this. Eftel thinks about how he is Stormgale in actuality, and that he really is crying because his descendants are the lowest of lows. Anyway, his father then brings up how Eftel has managed to cultivate himself despite being talentless. He heard about how Eftel has managed to get a pre-booked spot in the military college just because of how good he is with the sword. Eftel confirms it. The father seemingly enjoys this, as he smiles and laughs. This made Eftel think that maybe he wasn't such a bad person after all. But his father then goes on to say that this means that he no longer needs to give Eftel any money. Because once in the college takes care of the student and their expenses. And after 3 years in college, A student is given a job in the military, from which they can earn a monthly salary. That would make it so that the father doesn't need to give any more money to the useless Eftel. This changes Eftel's mind again, as he understands that his father is a body part after all. He is also annoyed by the thought that his father made them come all the way to the palace to insult them like that. However, this is when the Duke calls the heir to his throne, his son Joachim, and tells him that despite everything, Eftel still carries the surname of their family. So, they can't make him humiliate him further by being incompetent at the military school, which is why he suggests Joachim check him out. Joachim loves the idea, as he wants to be the instructor to the dog. Meanwhile, Eftel understands the real purpose behind being brought here. They were sent to a practice arena for a sparring match to happen. Fraser put on the chest armor for Eftel and gave him some advice. He said that while the fight was going to be a sparring match, Eftel should always keep his guard up. After all, Joachim is a level beyond them. When he was 15 years old, Joachim was already well-revered and feared swordsman. He also adds that unlike Mariah, Joachim won't hold back at all, so Eftel needs to be careful. This makes Eftel understand that Mariah was holding back. As a last piece of advice, Fraser told Eftel to surrender if he feels like his life is in danger. Following this, the two of them step forward for battle. Joachim tells Eftel that he could have just opted to run away and not fight him at all. But Eftel makes it clear that he isn't among the ones who run away. After this, Joachim brings out the swords and tosses one to Eftel, who catches it. However, Eftel is shocked by how much heavier the sword felt than the ones he used. Joachim explains that these were custom-made swords for battle, and that they are way heavier compared to normal ones. To intimidate Eftel, he tells him to imagine just what would happen if this were to hit someone's skull. Eftel doesn't get what he means, which leads to Joachim calling him a hopeless fool just like his mother. This angers Eftel, but Joachim continues on, saying that he will be teaching both Eftel and his mother about the ways of the Alcott. He keeps on yapping about how his mother is a disgrace, and that she coerced their father into getting her pregnant in hopes of giving birth to a strong child. But she ended up giving birth to another useless one in Eftel. Joachim expresses his desire to end Eftel's mother for bringing disgrace to the family, but he will have to make do now by finishing off Eftel. This angers Eftel, who couldn't believe that Joachim was his brother. Joachim kept taunting Eftel to fight him, asking if he peed himself in fear. He crosses all limits by suggesting that he would get gentle with Eftel, the same way their father was gentle with Eftel's mother in bed. Eftel was disgusted that such a vile creature was his descendant, and immediately went to attack. The attack overwhelmed Joachim and pushed him back quite a few steps. Eftel didn't even need to use mana augmentation, yet they had this guy reeling. It made him wonder if Joachim was lying to others about being good in the first place. Eventually, Joachim manages to catch Eftel's onslaught in a strong block and looks to make a comeback. However, Eftel uses his mana augmentation right then to break through the block, hitting Joachim in the face with the sword. This resulted in Joachim breaking his facial bones and losing some teeth. Eftel then declares that he went easy on him now, but if he dare utters his mother's name with his vile mouth again, he won't show mercy. Joachim calls him a bastard and asks for him to wait, but Eftel emphatically states that if anyone calls him that again, he will take their life. After the fight, Eftel's mother was shocked and asked Eftel if he was even her son. Eftel says that he indeed is, and gently smiles at her before looking to leave. However, as tradition, he goes back to his father and asks for his leave. His father wishes him best of luck for military college, and Eftel and his mother leave the place. On their way back, Eftel apologizes to his mother for behaving differently today. His mother tells him he shouldn't apologize, and that he is acting like a concerned parent more than anything. Eftel thinks that makes a lot of sense, as in a way he is their forefather. After this, the mother and son duo happily coast back to home. Eftel had no idea that the first battle of his life was going to be an army organized by his own family. A few days later, the royal knights are ordered to mobilize, and they go out on their newest conquest. Duke Alcott's men see this and inform the Duke about it, saying that the royal knights have gone to attack the neighbors. The Duke asks if the barbarians are involved too, to which his men tell him that they're stationed at the southwest of the capital. This excites the Duke, as he gets ready to begin his coup d'état. Meanwhile, at Eftel's house, he was pondering about how it had been 2 weeks since he met his father. Seeing how they were, Eftel expected them to try and plot to take revenge for what had happened, but to his surprise, they haven't done anything yet. As Eftel and his mother were going about their day, suddenly, a knock was heard on the door. Eftel opens the door and sees blood being splattered on the floor. It was his brother Fraser and headmaster Mariah, but severely injured and bloodied. They also had an infant baby with them, so it raised questions. 12 hours earlier, the headmaster and Fraser gathered the Royal Knights of Azure to inform them that they had been called up to join with the king's army to join the operation against the GREATE Kingdom and their allies. So, the knights were expected to hold firm and protect the kingdom with all their might. After the speech, Mariah asks Fraser why the security in the kingdom has been heightened so much. Fraser reveals that they've been informed of a potential plot being planned by the Chancellor to assassinate the Crown Prince. This is because the kingdom is currently divided into 2 sides. The first side supports the existing monarch, led by the king. The other side supports his elder brother, the Chancellor. The former king chose his younger son to be the king because he was more talented, but this left the older son with a sour taste. The current thing didn't have a son for the longest time though, which made the Chancellor's son the heir to the crown. However, just recently the queen gave birth to a son, making the child the crown prince. This has upsetted the Chancellor, and rumors are that they are planning to assassinate the little child. This shocks Mariah, as he knows that Fraser's father, the Duke of Alcott, is one of the biggest supporters of the Chancellor. Just then, the castle is attacked by the barbarians, causing trouble. Mariah handles the oncoming barbarians, while Fraser goes inside to secure the crown prince. Mariah did a great job of handling the barbarians, but when Fraser went inside, he saw that the crown prince was on the verge of being assassinated. Despite this, Fraser valiantly fought to save the crown prince and escaped with him. They were looking for a safe haven for the child, so Fraser brought him to Eftel's house. Eftel couldn't believe that they were doing so much to take the life of an innocent kid. Eftel asks Fraser how did the barbarians make it past the barrier when there were guards out there. Fraser says that it has to do with their father's involvement, as he is the leader of the Chancellor's squad. So, his father has the most to gain if the Chancellor succeeds. This disgusted Eftel, as he couldn't believe that one of his descendants had stooped so low. Afterwards, Mariah asks Fraser what they should do now. Fraser crosses out going back to the capital, as hostile forces are controlling it. However, he does think that if they can somehow make it to the frontier, the crown prince will be safe under the royal army's custody. However, it was late at night, so they couldn't possibly mobilize then and let the crown prince get sick from the night air. So they decide to move when the sun rises, and they do so when the time comes. They get ready to leave, as Fraser thanks Iria, Eftel's mother, for helping them. But before they go, Eftel also comes with his sword and equipment ready, wanting to join them. Mariah is happy with that, as they need as many people as possible. Meanwhile, Eftel is doing this because he feels an obligation towards the kingdom. After his time as the sage Eftel in the previous life, he thinks he should do something as his reincarnation. He decides to teach all the evil descendants of his a lesson they won't forget. Eftel's mother didn't want to let him go, and was crying, but she eventually allowed her son to leave on this noble trip. Eftel felt sorry for his mother, but there was no way he was going to forgive his father for his treacherous ways. They start moving. After a while, Fraser says they will take the mountain route, go through forest near. If they make it through, the passage to the frontier will get there, and they will reach it in no time. They all get ready to take the route when suddenly, Mariah overhears some murmurs. Not long after, 5 barbarians with weapons reveal themselves. They realize that these barbarians were waiting for them to come out. The barbarians tell them to hand over the crown prince if they are to get out of here alive. Mariah realizes that one of them needs to hold onto the crown prince, so only 2 of them need to take on the 5 barbarians. That will be 2.5 barbarians per man, but he still decides to take them on. Just when he is about to give orders, he sees that Eftel had already attacked the barbarians, and he absolutely decimated the barbarians, leaving them helpless. Soon he took them all out, leaving Maria shocked. However, he didn't actually take them all out, as one of them was spared, and he tried to run away. Eftel notices this and was about to give him chase, but he is told not to do so by his brother Fraser and headmaster Maria. Fraser in particular told him that while it might be more convenient for them to finish off everyone right now, they can't act in haste and trouble themselves. After all, their main goal is to make sure the crown prince reaches safety. That being said, Fraser praises his younger brother Eftel for how good he has become. Just from his movements alone, he can tell that Eftel is now a lot better on the sword than headmaster Maria. Even though it was harsh, Maria kind of gets what Fraser means. He thinks that Eftel is quicker than him too, and that his best days have left him behind. However, he quickly remembers who he is and tells himself that he still is the best. He fires himself up. As Fraser asks him if anything is wrong, he says nope. They then decide to move forward and continue their journey. As they keep walking, suddenly both Fraser and Eftel start feeling unsettling. Fraser hears something and stops mid-track to listen to what it was. Eftel also stands back, as he feels that something is truly wrong in the forest. Fraser points out how they haven't run into any squirrels and rabbits for a while, and even the birds have stopped chirping. This has made them worried. They wonder what it could be, as the sounds and vibes keep becoming more suspicious. Fraser notices this and orders everyone to move on ahead, because standing there, no matter what the problem might be, doesn't seem like a good choice. The three of them quickly ran ahead. However, as they reached the end of the forest, they went through the bushes to see that a large army of opposition were waiting for them. This was shocking for Fraser, as while he expected them to operate openly now, he didn't expect such a big army to be mobilized for them. Just then, he sees that the flag of the army ahead was that of the Duke's special trained army. This stuns everyone, as this meant that Fraser and Eftel's father had directly joined the battle against them. Maria wondered if they're planning to bombard the forest with spells to take them out for good. Just then, Eftel smells something, before turning back to see that a fire had broken out behind them, blocking a possible retreat. Fraser assumes that the cryptic sounds they heard earlier were bombs going off. Maria understands that the opposition wants to smoke them out of the forest and into them. He looked at the crown prince, who didn't have any clue about what was going on, and was smiling from seeing everyone panic. Maria asks Fraser if there is not any way for them to at least save the crown princess. However, Fraser thought it was useless, as even if the three of them were to charge at the army at once, they would be running into a blockade and be finished off in moments. They can't go ahead because of the army, and they can't retreat back because of the fire. It was a classic example of being caught between a rock and a hard place. However, Maria isn't among the ones to back down. He tells Eftel to hold onto the prince, as he says that if one is willing to move forward, they can go through anything. Basically, nothing is over until it is over, or so he likes to think. Shocked, the rest of them asked what Maria was intending to do. Maria valiantly declares that he will be charging at the army, whilst the other two use the distraction to escape. However, his plans are immediately shut down by Fraser, who says that this is not a realistic option at all. He doesn't like to let the gut do the thinking, but Eftel thinks that he should give Maria a pass because it is his nature. As for the only realistic option Fraser can think of, he thinks that he should be the one to go ahead and try to negotiate a deal with his father. Maria tried to stop Fraser, as doing this is quite dangerous, but Fraser was confident, saying that his father might be bad, but he isn't that far gone yet. So Fraser goes forward, arms in the air, stating that he is armless and that he is here to talk. He says there is no reason for fights to continue, no reason for anyone to get hurt. They can resolve it peacefully and pretend like this never happened in the first place. So he suggests they calm down and go back to the capital together. Leading the line, Joachim hears this and asks his father what he should do about it. The Duke of Alcott says that because it is a request by his dear son, he will go answer it in person. The Duke of Alcott goes over to Fraser, which makes Fraser hopeful, as he thinks the Duke will answer positively, because he wouldn't have come in public otherwise. However, the Duke of Alcott brings out a device and says that he is now sure that Fraser will be in his way no matter what, so he wants to get him done and over with. He uses that device and uses a lightning release to shock Frazier until he can no longer react and collapse. This stuns Mariah and Eftel. However, the Duke enjoys this, and later calls for his men to go all out and fire out how they want. His men father together and use group ritual to perform the 6th tier move perfected by Emperor Stormgale himself to attack whatever that remained of Frazier. The flames quickly engulf the entire area. Emotionally, Eftel was about to jump into the flames to save Frazier, but Mariah pulls him back and scolds him for trying to do something like that. However, Eftel didn't care and only wanted to save his brother, but it was too late. He wondered why did Frazier, a guy who put his life on the line for a kid who isn't even related to him, meet such a cruel fate. It reminds him of all the precious moments he had shared with Frazier, and this lights something inside Eftel, as he says that this is unfair. He got up, changed aura, changed mentality. Mariah is shocked and states that Eftel looks like a different man. Eftel recalls Merlin saying that he changes into a different person when he is mad in his previous life too. Eftel declares that he will be showing those twats what real magic looks like. Mariah tries to stop him, suggesting it won't end well for him if he tries to do something like that. However, Eftel ends up using the 9th tier skill called the Cositis. The area that was burned by the Duke's army is quickly frozen into solid ice, as everyone is taken aback. Mariah is left shocked by the fact that Eftel had basically frozen over the entire place. This shocked the Duke and his army too, as they couldn't believe that such a powerful attack could be even launched. This is when Eftel comes forward asking that because of how sorry the world has become, they must be thinking it is impossible for a single sage to use a trick like that. Yet, he is not even good at doing magic-type skills, but they're still pissing themselves in fear because of it. So, he asks his father what he intends to do with such a poorly put-together army. This shocks the Duke, as he did not expect Eftel to be there. He could not believe that the talentless kid was the one who did something like this. The Duke tells men to not waste any time and attack Eftel, to show him the real might of Azure's magic core. The mages team up and use a group ritual chant to fire out a 5th tier blazing arrow technique. Eftel found this funny, as he questioned if it really requires for so many people to team up to do a 5th rank move. The arrows rain down on him though, and this makes the Duke think that they've gotten the better of Eftel. However, Eftel walks out from the smoke, and scathed. He asks them if they really thought a measly arrow technique would be enough to beat him. This left everyone gobsmacked, as they were sure that the arrows hit him. This was surprising for them, as the technique they used was a hybrid of a 2nd tier magical arrow and 5th tier explosion arrow, yet it still didn't do damage. This is when Eftel mocks them and asks the mages if they've never heard of the active barrier defense technique, which he used to block the attacks. The Duke, frustrated, tells his squad to stop being lazy and pull out their ultimate technique to finish things. He calls for them to use the tier 6 Eftel. The mages oblige and get ready to perform it. Eftel sighs, as he expected nothing better from the one-trick ponies. The mages execute the concentrated fire attack on Eftel, but Eftel was appalled by the fact that his name was attached to such a useless trick. So, when they attack him with the 6th tier move, he simply counters it with a 7th tier ultimate defense barrier. The barrier consumes the attack, as the mages are dumbfounded as to how Eftel was doing all that. Eftel smirked and found them pitiful, before rushing into battle physically. This time he wanted to check and see if he can compete with them with his swordsmanship too. He starts right off by cutting through the forehead of an opponent, and he wastes no time in taking down one after another. Joachim orders his men to engage Eftel, as he was rampaging through their lineup. Meanwhile, Eftel was thinking that a nickname like the Legion Slayer would suit him. This is when he starts taking out a few more guys. It seemed like with each swing of the sword, lives were fading in front of him. He took countless lives, which ended up forcing the remaining crew to try and run away. However, Eftel finds this weird, as he asks the troops if their mother never taught them to not turn their backs to the enemy. Eftel follows it up by slashing down another dozen men with ease. One of them made it behind Eftel, and he tried to do chance to use magic arrows on Eftel. This makes Eftel laugh, as he questions whether the guy still thinks that a crappy arrow spell would work. He then proceeds to behead the guy with one slash of the sword. The remaining ones saw this, and understood that they were going against an indomitable monster, so they kept running. By now, Eftel was bored of taking the lives of people who were running away. He compares the experience to hunting rabbits in the forest, which isn't even worthy of considering as practice. So he decides to show them something special. Eftel forms a magic circle on top of his head, and suddenly the weather starts changing. The troops notice this and wonder if Eftel was really changing the weather. This was something only possible in legends. Eftel laughs and says that he is changing the weather, but he isn't summoning the clouds, he is summoning thunder. And he wasn't summoning small thunderstrikes like they do, he was going for a proper one. He was now using a 10th tier magic skill to show them what the real storm gale is like. He summons the thunder and throws it onto the enemy, burning and destroying them. As the area gets covered by a thunderous sound and light, the attack was so powerful that it left anyone who came into contact with it toasted to ashes. Such was the devastating scale of the attack. Joachim and Duke Alcott, who were not in harm's way, were still blasted over by the impact. They should have met their end right there, but the father and son duo were protected thanks to a bubble barrier. The two of them wondered what it was. That being said, they were glad that it had been saved and thought it was a gift from the gods. This is when the bubble is popped, and Eftel starts approaching them. Seeing him, both father and son were intimidated, as they didn't want any part of the monster. Joachim goes up and tries to confront Eftel though, asking him if he has any idea what he had just done by wiping out the entire Alcott troops. However, he is met with a strong punch from Eftel, which once again brings Joachim's jaw and makes his teeth fly out. Eftel then approached his father and stated that he will now be arresting them in the crime of plotting to assassinate the crown prince. He is arresting them because it would be hard to convince people if he says that all of them lost their lives in battle. So, it's better to take them alive and get them punished publicly. Angered, Duke Alcott says that Eftel just committed treason, and that it's a severe crime that he has to pay for. Eftel simply responds by punting his father's head like a football, breaking his jaw and teeth as well. Eftel then states that he will show no mercy to the person who would willingly take his own son's life for personal gain. So he is taking them in. After that, Duke Alcott, Joachim Alcott, and their allies were all found guilty of plotting the assassination of the crown prince, and were hence publicly executed as a result. Because of this, the Alcott family's status as nobles were called into question, but Eftel couldn't care less. He was excited to meet Fraser, who was discharged from the hospital. Fraser tells Eftel that he is okay now, and that he was saved thanks to the necklace he got from the heirloom family. Eftel quickly recognizes the necklace as his own possession from the previous life, the Oberon's guard, which protects against evil. Turns out it was what saved Fraser from certain loss of life. It made Eftel happy that Fraser was the one who got the Oberon's guard. Fraser proudly flaunted the necklace, stating that maybe it was the Emperor Stormgale who had saved his life. Overwhelmed, Eftel hugs his older brother, as they share an emotional moment together. After this, the aforementioned problem of the Alcott family's noble status was called into question. After all, the crimes committed by his father were too much. However, Fraser was lauded for putting his own life on the line for the sake of saving the crown prince, which is why the king allowed the Alcotts to keep the duke title and hold onto all their land. However, because the previous duke, his father, and Joachim were executed, that left Fraser as the duke. And Duke Fraser made sure to bring back Iria and Eftel back into the palace, and give them their own suite. After this, Duke Fraser, Headmaster Mariah, and Eftel went to a faraway mountain where Eftel was going to show them his skills. He put on a special barrier to make sure they don't get hurt, but still told them to maintain distance as a precautionary. Eftel then showcases the 7th tier fire technique to absolutely destroy the land on the mountain. This left Duke Fraser and Mariah stunned. Following this, Eftel showed them another one of his 7th tier skills, which was the wind release. The wind was so powerful and strong that it blew away everything. Mariah and Duke Fraser understand that they weren't wrong about Eftel being strong. He really is that great. Firing 2 back-to-back 7th tier skills is truly tremendous. Fraser is shocked by just how strong Eftel really is. Eftel apologizes to them for hiding his skills. Fraser tells him it is fine and that he must have had reasons to hide it. Eftel tries to tell them a reason, but he doesn't know what to say. This is when Mariah assures him that he doesn't need to tell them. After all, he can already see that there is a reason not to tell based on the destruction caused by him. This relieves Eftel, as he wouldn't be able to tell them that he was reincarnated, because that would piss off the goddess as well. Anyway, Mariah and Frasier go on about how this power should stay hidden and must not be made public at any cost. If it gets revealed, then it might disbalance the way the world works. After this, the two ask Eftel his plans for the future and the military academy. This is when Eftel reveals that he doesn't want to go there, and that he will go to the Crone Magic Academy. Mariah and Frasier are not in line with this, as they think there is no need for him to learn more magic, but he should focus on swordsmanship instead. However, Eftel is adamant on going to the Magic Academy. He also knows that there probably isn't much for him to learn at the academy, but he wants to see the research paper and learn the new progressions in magic over the last 400 years. After a while, Mariah and Frasier agree to let him study magic, but they also want him to continue doing swordsmanship, so they decide to teach him until he is 15. Just like that, the remaining months fly by until Eftel is finally 15. Before leaving, Eftel pens a letter to his mother Iria, telling her about him leaving the kingdom to go for the entrance exams of the Magic Academy. He thanks her for everything and leaves discreetly. He decides to visit their previous home one last time before leaving, and he gets nostalgic when he gets there. After coming out though, he sees his mother, Duke Frasier and Headmaster Mariah all present there. Eftel is shocked, but his mother says that a mother can always predict their son's move. She then hugs her son close, as Eftel apologizes for trying to leave without meeting her one last time. Iria also calls him cruel for this reason. However, he is an adult now, so she tells him that he can do whatever he wants to do and study well. But if he ever feels homesick, he can come back to her. Overwhelmed, Eftel hugs his mother this time and thanks her for all the years she took care of him. This makes Mariah bawl out as well. After everything is done, Eftel bids an emotional and tearful farewell to his family, as he was heading to another kingdom. However, he also felt excited, because this time, he vows to not let anything subdue him from achieving greatness. This time, he vows to reach the pinnacle of magic as a whole. Eftel suddenly halts, his entire body tightening as if sensing something unseen. He turns sharply, scanning the distance before bowing his head in quiet resolve. With firm determination in his eyes, he thanks his companions for everything and continues his journey without hesitation, heading toward the meeting place of the wizards. Crossing a wide stone bridge, he moves through the steady rhythm of the city, voices merging with the clatter of hooves and the creak of wooden carts. Crowds surge around him. Some hurry past, some linger to admire the view, while others sit along the parapet, laughing and chatting in the warm breeze. For the first time in a long while, Eftel feels a quiet sense of peace. The lively noise of travelers and merchants fills him with a faint comfort, a reminder that the world still moves forward. Tired from the long road, he slows his pace and looks around for a place to rest. A small tea house tucked between two old buildings catches his eye. Its cozy, secluded charm feels inviting. Stepping inside, he finally lets his thoughts settle. Home now exists only in memory. Familiar walls and gentle faces left behind, sealed within his heart. Ahead lies only the path he chose. He reminds himself of his purpose. At the academy, his goal is simple: to refine his abilities and grow stronger without attracting unwanted attention. Fame would be a burden, not a reward. If his power drew too much notice, people might idolize or imitate him, forcing titles upon him that he never asked for. He only wants to advance quietly, mastering magic as a student among students. Just then, his thoughts are interrupted by nearby voices. Someone mentions a name, Edward Sama. The tone carries admiration and excitement. They speak of a renowned wizard who has journeyed far to reach this very region, praising his reputation and offering heartfelt gratitude for his arrival. Eftel listens silently, unaware that his own path is about to cross with this so-called prodigies in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The man politely asked Edward to give a lecture to the kids in his magic class about true magic. But Edward didn't even bother to hide his irritation. He looked up from his book and questioned why the man thought he could just talk to him without permission. Edward was part of the Adventurers Guild, an A-rank adventurer, and clearly proud of it. He told the man to stay quiet since he was busy reading. The man immediately panicked and apologized, saying he hadn't meant to disturb him. He begged Edward to forgive the misunderstanding, trying to smooth things over. But Edward didn't let it slide easily. He reminded him that every second of his time was valuable, and he had no intention of wasting it on trivial conversations. The man bowed his head and accepted the scolding, asking once more for forgiveness before retreating. Watching this, Eftal couldn't help thinking how arrogant this magician was. A full-blown narcissist. But Edward didn't see it that way. To him, it was only natural. After all, he was an A-rank adventurer at just 20 years old. In his eyes, comparing himself to a 50-year-old C-rank mage wasn't even worth the effort. The humiliated man held his head in both hands, struggling to keep what little dignity he had left. His face burned red with anger and shame, stung by Edward's sharp words. Every insult hit deeper, leaving behind a bitter sense of helplessness. Edward didn't stop there. He called the old teacher a washed-up magician from some forgotten town, a man long past his prime who could only disappoint anyone watching him. Edward said he hoped the man would eventually realize his mistake. The teacher, shoulders trembling, muttered a quiet apology, barely able to speak. Trying to ease the tension, he mentioned an upcoming banquet with fine drinks and invited Edward to join. But Edward only found it laughable. Without warning, he yanked the metal chain attached to the girl beside him, pulling her close. She let out a cry of pain, her eyes wide with terror. Edward said that today was a special day for him and his demon servant. He told the teacher to pay attention, saying something remarkable was about to happen, something worth witnessing. He explained that the adaptation period for the slave mark on her body was nearly over. The symbol had finally stabilized, becoming clear and complete. The old man's expression changed as he realized what that meant. If any foreign substance entered her body before the process finished, the mark structure would collapse. Edward confirmed the thought with satisfaction. Eftal, watching all of this, understood that the girl had been bought and was still in recovery before being used for anything else. He felt sick just seeing it. Still, he couldn't help but think, if the young man hadn't taken in that demon girl, she might have suffered the same fate as this poor one. A man burst through the door, out of breath and panicked. The waitress greeted him with a smile, but before she could say anything, he shouted that a giant orc was rampaging through the streets. A real monster. The room went silent. Eftal froze as the words sank in. His mind raced, picturing crushed carts, shattered houses, and bodies lying in the dust. If it was true, the damage would be catastrophic. Outside, the orc stood among the ruins, chewing lazily on the remains of a broken cart. Every movement reeked of brute pleasure, destruction for the sake of power. The cart splintered completely, reduced to a pile of debris beneath its massive feet. Then, the creature suddenly turned, its gaze locking onto Eftal. The young mage stiffened, caught off guard and unsure what to do. The townspeople began shouting over each other. Some demanded a messenger be sent to the knights. Others urged the guild to send a specialist. The old teacher tried to calm everyone, reminding them that Edward Wildfire, a high-class A-rank adventurer, was right there. The crowd lit up with relief, cheering that they were safe now. Edward, however, didn't share their panic. He scoffed, saying the creature was only a B+ level threat, nothing to be afraid of. He told them to stand back and leave the orc to him. A few girls nearby nodded in awe, saying that this was exactly what they'd expect from an A-rank adventurer like him. Eftal felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Even after 400 years, an A-rank still carried the same weight, powerful, respected, untouchable. Edward, full of confidence, stepped forward and declared that he'd take on the monster himself. He said it was time to show everyone what real magic looked like, the kind of thing a small village would never witness in a lifetime. The crowd erupted in cheers. Faces once pale with fear now glowed with hope. People believed the nightmare would soon be over. Edward raised his hand and summoned a powerful atmospheric spirit. The orc stirred immediately, sensing the thick surge of mana in the air. The adventurer called upon the spirit to lend him the promised flame, and then unleashed a fourth-tier fire spell, Holy Flash. A blinding light tore through the street, scorching everything in its path. The explosion hit the orc dead on, shaking the ground and echoing through the village. The people gasped in awe, cheering as the smoke rose. Edward stood proudly, satisfied that he had once again proven his mastery over advanced magic. Fourth-tier spells were not something he threw around lightly, but Eftel only smirked, unimpressed that the so-called highest magic Edward could use was just fourth level. The adventurer dusted off his hands, declaring the battle finished. Yet the villagers didn't share his calm. Their faces were pale again, eyes wide with fear at the destructive power they had just witnessed. And then, before anyone could celebrate, the air shifted. The dust cleared, and from within it, the massive silhouette of the orc emerged, still standing. With a furious roar, it lunged forward, breaking through the haze and swinging its weapon down, desperate to crush its enemy once and for all. Edward stood frozen in disbelief. The monster was still standing, barely scratched. It didn't make sense. His strongest spell, a fourth-tier fire blast, should have erased it completely. The idea that his most powerful attack had done nothing was almost insulting. Then something clicked. A realization hit him like lightning. His eyes widened as everything suddenly made sense. This wasn't a normal orc. It was a berserker orc, a rare, high-class variant known for its monstrous endurance and resistance to magic. Against a creature like that, even advanced spells were useless. What would have annihilated a regular orc barely fazed this one. Edward's confidence vanished. Without hesitation, he turned and bolted, sending the villagers into chaos. Their supposed savior was running for his life. Desperation filled his voice as he called out to the atmospheric spirit again, begging for help. He demanded it grant him the protective barrier he'd been promised. He quickly began chanting, activating a third-tier sacred spell, Protection. A bright golden glow erupted around him, spreading into a dome of pure light. The barrier sealed off the area completely, shielding him from harm. But the villagers inside the barrier started to panic. Instead of defending them, Edward had trapped everyone inside with him, confused and terrified, wondering why their hero had suddenly locked them away from the outside world. One man pounded desperately on the golden barrier, trying to break free, but it held firm. Panic spread fast. Edward's laugh cut through the chaos, cold and mocking. He told the villagers they were just bait. A nobleman like him couldn't die in some backwater village. He would leave quietly while the rest entertained the monster. The villagers froze in disbelief. Rescue had turned into a trap. They shouted, begged, demanded to be freed, convinced Edward was playing some cruel joke. But their pleas didn't matter. The ground shook as the berserker orc charged toward them, massive footsteps echoing like thunder. Terror gripped their hearts. People scrambled, stumbling over one another, desperate to flee. Faces twisted in fear, legs moved in chaos, everyone thinking only of survival. He focused, chanting the 6th-level spell of the Gospel of the Seraphim, Seraphim Scatter. The barrier exploded in bright, blinding flashes, collapsing instantly and freeing the trapped villagers. Edward, his slave, and his tutor could only stare, stunned, unable to believe what just happened. The villagers cheered, relief washing over them. Freedom had returned. They scattered in all directions, running for safety, hearts racing but filled with joy. The tide had turned, and the monstrous threat no longer had the advantage. Edward freezes, stunned that a boy just shattered his highest ward. The idea that a youth could undo a high-ranking mage's protection feels impossible. And even the teacher swears the spell broke without a single spoken word. Eftel knows he's drawn attention, but he won't stand by and watch an orc eat people. He weighs his options fast. Showing more power now would ruin his plan to stay invisible. Clarity hits him like a cold blade. He decides to mask strength as weakness. He will cast a third-tier attack on the surface, then instantly amplify it into a ninth-tier spatial distortion, the spatial blade. Later he'll tell a story. He meant to use a fourth-tier spell but ran out of time, narrowly escaping death. That lie will sell the illusion of limitation and keep prying eyes at bay. He sets the plan in motion, quiet and resolute. The massive orc swung its weapon with terrifying force, but the young man moved like lightning. With perfect timing and effortless grace, he dodged the blow, his expression calm, eyes steady. To any onlooker, it would seem he was handling the fight with nothing more than a third-tier spell, exactly the illusion he wanted. He cast Fire Strike, a third-level spell, and the villagers gasped. A fragile-looking boy controlling third-tier magic so freely was astonishing. Eftel's mind was sharp. While everyone's attention was glued to his flashy third-level display, now was the perfect moment to unleash his hidden trump card, the ninth-tier spatial blade. Suddenly, the orc screamed, a sound so horrifying it made the villagers wince. Pain consumed the massive creature, relentless and excruciating, twisting the battlefield into a nightmare. Eftel watched, stunned, as the orc writhed, clearly suffering far beyond what third-tier magic should inflict. The villagers cheered, relieved and amazed that such a fragile-looking boy had defeated a terrifying berserker with only a low-level spell. Even Edward was left speechless, struggling to comprehend how a mere third-tier attack could crush a foe his fourth-tier magic couldn't touch. Doubts gnawed at him, shaking his confidence and leaving him questioning everything he thought he knew about strength and battle. The massive orc finally collapsed with a thunderous crash, letting out a final, muffled roar that shook the area. The sound confirmed it. The young hero had triumphed over a fearsome opponent. The teacher couldn't hide his awe. He explained that this magic wasn't just raw power. It had been refined over years of practice, achieving maximum efficiency and precision. At first glance, the boy looked like he'd cast a simple third-tier spell, but anyone with real knowledge could see this was the work of a truly enlightened magician, wielding skill and experience far beyond his age. The old man even noted that the effect reminded him of fifth-level magic. Edward, watching in disbelief, struggled to believe a teenager of just 14 or 15 could command such complexity. Eftel, observing quietly, realized the task was complete. The boy himself felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had displayed his power without revealing too much. Training and developing magic had always felt easy to him, so it wasn't surprising he seemed almost to neglect it entirely. Yet here he was, Ranka, without breaking a sweat. He considered his next move, wondering what to do now. He wanted to address the crowd, explain what had happened, but then he froze. Something was off. The orc berserker, though defeated, was still burning. Hellish flames clung to its massive form, bright tongues of fire dancing across its skin, smoke curling in the air, carrying the acrid stench of roasting flesh. The crowd buzzed with excitement, amazed that the boy had incinerated the berserker so completely that only glowing coals remained. To everyone watching, it looked like he'd unleashed fifth-level magic, and whispers of awe rippled through the villagers. Eftel, meanwhile, studied the adventurer closely, confirming his name, Edward. With that, he relaxed slightly, marking the name as either a potential ally or a future rival. Turning to Edward, the boy's tone sharpened, firm and commanding. He reminded the adventurer to show respect to his elders. His words left no room for disdain. Anyone underestimating older generations of magic would face consequences. The teacher nodded gratefully, a bit embarrassed, then spoke up. He warned that Edward's earlier escape attempt could be interpreted as an attack on human life, a potential crime, and insisted he had no right to keep a slave by his side. For the sake of justice, he urged Edward to release the girl and surrender voluntarily. The girl, standing nearby, felt a mix of embarrassment and relief, hearing unexpected support from a stranger. Edward, realizing resistance was pointless, grudgingly accepted the conditions. With a calm nod, Eftel bid everyone farewell, wishing them well, then melted silently into the twilight. His footsteps faded, his figure vanishing into the horizon, leaving behind only the memory of a mysterious savior. The girl's eyes followed him, a faint spark of hope flickering within. In him, she glimpsed the possibility of a better life, free from oppression. Meanwhile, the boy continued alone, crossing the scorching desert sands. The situation was more complicated than it first seemed. He knew the girl was bound by law and circumstance, yet she refused to fall behind, pushing through fatigue and pain, drawn forward by the man who had given her hope and a glimpse of a brighter future. The young man stopped abruptly, a sharp edge of frustration in his voice, as he asked the girl how long she planned to trail him across deserts and cities, constantly distracting him from his mission. He'd noticed she was everywhere he went, silently following. The girl opened her mouth, then hesitated, her words caught in fear and uncertainty. Eftel sighed, finally giving in, admitting defeat with a heavy tone. He promised such a situation would never happen again. His expression carried genuine regret, his voice slightly trembling under the weight of the tension he'd felt. Now, the girl who had been his constant shadow stepped closer. She mumbled something about having gelatin, and Eftel blinked, puzzled, asking her to clarify. Embarrassed, she bit her lip, unsure how to phrase her thoughts. Gently, he pressed, asking her plainly about her true wishes. Her voice was quiet but earnest as she finally spoke. She asked him to become her new master, offering service in exchange for safety and care. In her words was a desperate hope for protection, a wish to find a noble and honest guardian willing to take responsibility for her fragile life. Eftel froze, stunned by the sudden, serious request. His mind raced, calculating the gravity of such a decision. She pleaded passionately, explaining that a slave without a master was helpless, stripped of rights, and exposed to the cruelty of the world. If caught without protection, she could be arrested as a runaway, subjected to the harshest punishments. Her fear was palpable, raw, and Eftel felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, realizing that granting her request was no small choice. It was a vow to shield her from a merciless world. She added that if she were arrested, she would be taken to the nearest slave trader and sold, with no chance to decide her own future. Eftel realized that even without an official owner, the slave mark didn't guarantee freedom. If she fell into the wrong hands, she could be bound to someone new, and disobedience could bring extreme punishment or death. The girl said he seemed like a decent young man, far better than the rude blonde adventurer she had before. Eftel nodded in agreement. He asked her to explain how a demonic entity had ended up as a slave. She explained that her homeland had been defeated centuries ago in a war with humans, leaving her people completely subjugated. Born into slavery, she had never known any other life. Eftel listened, understanding that captured slaves rarely escaped their low status without going through complicated legal procedures. It was cruel but common. She also revealed that she was part of the royal line of demons, a distant relative of the headmaster of Altina Academy, one of the most prestigious magic schools for demons. She was even related to Merlin Sama. Eftel took it in silently, realizing that her story connected not only to tragedy but also to powerful lineage, far beyond her life as a slave. The girl added that despite her noble birth, she had been forced into the humiliating life of a slave, stripped of dignity and rights. Her fate weighed heavily on her, making life unbearable. Eftel raised his head, surprised, and asked her to confirm what she just said, needing to make sure he hadn't misheard such an incredible confession. The girl, cautious, asked if he really doubted her noble origin. Eftel clarified that he wasn't questioning that. He asked again, making sure she meant Merlin, the famous student of Edel, one of the 4 emperors. The girl's eyes widened as she realized who he meant. She confirmed that Merlin Sama had indeed been raised by Eftel and was one of the legendary 4 emperors, the wisest and most powerful among them. She herself was an exceptional sorceress, at the very top of her hierarchy, even among demons. Eftel realized Merlin had a descendant. For centuries had passed, and now this girl had risen to head the Demon Witchcraft Academy, achieving top recognition and skill. He chuckled softly, noting how much had changed in that time, the power structures, political alliances, everything. Given the long lifespan of half-vampire girls, it made sense she could have lived several hundred years. This confirmed the logic that a noble bloodline could persist through centuries. With all of this in mind, the young man made an important decision, one that could change everything for the girl and their next steps. The young man announced that he would temporarily take on the role of her teacher and patron, promising to protect and support Anastasia throughout their journey. His firm tone immediately calmed her nerves, and she looked at him with hope. She clasped her hands in gratitude, thanking her new master sincerely for his trust and understanding. Ethel admitted he never expected to meet a close relative of the legendary Merlin in such a remote corner of the world. Considering it a real miracle, he looked at her closely and asked an important question. Her name, Anastasia, smiling shyly, quietly told him. Feeling the ease of their new connection, he hoped they could build a good relationship. Despite their difference in status and experience, the girl gently asked her new master to take care of her, relying on his kindness. Together, they reached the city of Darmstadt just before sunset. Ethel breathed a sigh of relief, glad they had made it in time. He cheerfully told Anastasia he had come to participate in the entrance exams for the Academy of Witchcraft, happening the very next morning. She asked if he really planned to take the exams like an ordinary student. Ethel smiled and confirmed it, leaving her surprised and impressed. She admitted she would never have expected him to study at all. Laughing, Ethel suggested they first find a place to stay and rest, since proper preparation was needed for the exams. Anastasia's stomach growled loudly at that moment, and she blushed, embarrassed by the timing. Ethel reassured her, saying that little things like this happen to everyone, and suggested they grab a snack first to restore their energy. They stopped at Limit Steak, a restaurant famous for its meat. Anastasia whispered nervously, asking if it might be too expensive. Ethel told her not to worry about money. Today was a special occasion. She admitted she had none, but he just smiled, saying that after preparing for this day so long, he planned to eat meat until he was full. Inside, they were greeted warmly and shown to a table for two. Anastasia's eyes darted around, taking in the elegant interior and refined atmosphere, mentally agreeing it was clearly an expensive and prestigious place. The other patrons noticed the new arrivals. A few muttered in disapproval, saying it wasn't proper to bring a slave to such a restaurant. Others were surprised that a boy who looked 14 or 15 could even enter here. Anastasia felt a sharp pang of shame, lowering her head and stealing a glance at Ethel, who was already daydreaming about the food. They were led to their table, and Ethel thanked the waiter politely. He encouraged Anastasia to eat freely, insisting she shouldn't hold back. But when he looked around, she was gone. Panic rising, he called out for her, scanning the room. Then, finally spotting her, he was surprised and asked why she had decided to linger here, especially in a place where a slave wasn't supposed to be. Anastasia, smiling sheepishly, admitted she had already sat down. Ethel gestured kindly to a soft seat set up just for her next to the main table. She stared in disbelief. An ordinary slave getting a place of honor at the common restaurant table felt unreal. Ethel couldn't help but wonder why she was asking such obvious questions. Anastasia explained that a proper slave should kneel before their master and be ready to follow orders instantly. Ethel shook his head and told her she didn't have to do that with him anymore. She struggled to accept it, thinking this behavior was inappropriate. Ethel, noting how ingrained her slave habits were, took charge firmly but kindly. He invited her to sit at the table as a regular guest, enjoy the food, and forget the old rules. Sitting opposite her, Ethel noted approvingly that the restaurant chairs were excellent, surprisingly comfortable. Anastasia agreed, clearly impressed. Ethel reminded her that he had warned her about that. Meanwhile, the waiter grew annoyed at the boy's relaxed behavior. Ethel flipped thoughtfully through the menu, trying to decide what to order, just as the impatient waiter marched over, clearly losing patience. The waiter stepped forward sternly, insisting that slaves were strictly forbidden from sitting at the tables in this high-class restaurant. He reminded them that the place was frequented by nobles and influential guests. A provincial-looking boy like Eftel sticking out here was a problem, at least in their eyes. Respectfully, the waiter asked about the boy's funds, and Anastasia tensed, afraid a refusal might cause trouble. The employee suggested that Eftel had probably been brought in by mistake. This place wasn't meant for students. Anastasia quickly offered a compromise, saying she could sit on the floor or they could take their order outside. Eftel immediately refused, insisting everything would go as planned. With calm confidence, he pulled several large gemstones from his pocket. The waiter froze, eyes wide. These glittering crystals, dragon tears, were worth more than enough to cover the meal. Eftel placed them on the table and explained that such stones were common in his homeland, so funds weren't an issue. His composed tone and steady gaze commanded respect, instantly silencing any doubt. The staff and onlookers couldn't help but marvel at the sight of wealth and authority in the hands of a boy. The waiter's eyes practically popped out of his head. He stammered that these weren't just gems. They were dragon tears, born from the secretion of the Kaiser's dragon. Stones this pure were nearly impossible to find, and one alone was worth 50 gold coins. He guessed the boy must be from the Azul Mountains, where treasures like this were prized beyond measure. Overcome with panic at his earlier attitude, the waiter immediately apologized to the other guests, promising flawless service. Eftel didn't flinch. He calmly let it go and ordered the choicest cuts of meat in the restaurant. The staff immediately shifted into overdrive, halting service to other customers and preparing a VIP experience for the newcomers. The honored guests were escorted to a private room, and the staff bowed respectfully, showing genuine admiration. Anastasia could hardly believe her eyes. The sheer quantity and quality of the food was something only the wealthiest nobles ever enjoyed. She stared at the plates in awe. Eftel smiled, satisfied that the restaurant had understood and followed his instructions without hesitation. He nudged Anastasia, telling her to stop being shy and start eating. She hesitated, unsure if she was really allowed. The young man chuckled and explained that from now on, they'd spend a lot of time together, and it was better for her to get used to this new life. Eftel leaned back slightly and told Anastasia to see tonight's dinner as a little celebration just for her. He encouraged her to relax, stop being shy, and enjoy the meal. Otherwise, he warned, the meat would cool down and lose its taste. Anastasia quickly reassured him that she was more than happy with the invitation and eager to eat. Eftel smiled at her words and decided to add something more. He explained that he knew she had endured countless hardships and suffered abuse as a slave. The girl quietly nodded, remembering the difficult path that had brought her here. Eftel admitted honestly that he couldn't promise he'd never lose his temper, and if he ever treated her badly, it was okay for her to be upset with him. Anastasia blinked in surprise, unsure what angry even meant. Eftel realized that years of slavery had erased her ability to express negative emotions, replacing them with silent acceptance. He explained that being able to refuse what she disliked or felt uncomfortable with was part of claiming her own freedom. Her mouth fell open in shock, struggling to take in the idea. Eftel just smiled calmly, eating as if to show that change was possible, that she didn't have to live under restrictions imposed by others. Anastasia listened carefully, absorbing every word, and felt a warmth she had never known. A sense of being cared for and important, and the courage to demand better treatment. Eftel thought back to his strategy for breaking slave habits. He suggested practical exercises for her, small steps to help overcome fears and complexes, training her to reclaim the life she deserved. For the first time, the girl felt hope. At first, Anastasia didn't really understand what Eftel meant when he asked her to get angry at him. The idea seemed completely wrong. How could she show anger toward her teacher? But Eftel reassured her, explaining that it was normal, even useful, and encouraged her to take a risk and try. She attempted it, but instinctively bit her lip, clearly struggling to summon the courage to act on her own feelings. Eftel noticed and just smiled, quietly amused at the situation, letting out a small laugh at her awkwardness. Finally, the long-awaited day of the entrance exams to Krone Witchcraft Academy arrived. Eftel and Anastasia stepped onto the academy grounds, and immediately, their eyes widened at the sheer scale of the place. Towers stretched skyward, courtyards sprawled endlessly, and the noise of the crowd buzzed like a hive. Eftel paused for a moment, slightly confused, searching for the reception desk. After scanning the area, he spotted a sign pointing the way. Anastasia, looking pleased, turned to her master and showed off her new outfit, beaming her thanks. Eftel grinned, happy she liked the clothes, and told her she no longer had to wear her old, impractical garments. She nodded, clearly relieved. As they moved closer to the registration area, the crowd's noise grew louder. Anastasia was stunned at the number of wizards gathered for the exams. She hadn't expected such a massive turnout. Eftel emphasized the word especially, hinting that there was more to the competition than met the eye. One of the academy staff then stepped forward, announcing that every candidate needed to register before taking the test. Graduates from Krone Academy would be divided into 3 branches: elite, specialists, and guild. Basically, completing the academy meant a guaranteed career, so the exams always attracted huge crowds. Anastasia's eyes widened even more, realizing just how intense the competition would be. Eftel, glancing around at the huge crowd, suddenly lit up with a bright idea, which left Anastasia completely confused. Without missing a beat, he confidently suggested that she try taking the exam too. Anastasia froze, stunned by the proposal. She couldn't believe he was actually asking her to participate. Eftel quickly reassured her, explaining that this particular exam wasn't limited by quotas or directions. It was open to anyone. If she performed well, she could learn valuable skills that might even help her land a proper job later on. Slowly, Anastasia nodded, her initial shock giving way to cautious agreement. Not waiting for a refusal, Eftel made the decision for both of them, telling the academy worker that they would take the exam together. Panic flashed across Anastasia's face. She felt overwhelmed and unsure of her own abilities. Eftel, however, was confident. He had known about demons for a long time and understood their magical potential. Their skills often surpassed ordinary humans, and she already had a noticeable magical aura. To boost her confidence, he reminded her that she was distantly related to Merlin himself. If she could even use magic a little, she would be fine. The reception staff, flustered from the busy crowd, apologized for the delay in preparing their entry numbers and handed them 588 and 589. With their numbers in hand, Eftel led the way, motioning for Anastasia to follow. She hesitated for a moment, surprised, but quickly caught up, hurrying after her master. The organizers called for everyone who had registered to enter the Colosseum, where the examination areas awaited. Following the crowd, the pair confidently made their way through the tunnel and stepped into the massive arena. The scale of the place was staggering. In the center stretched a huge battlefield designed for training battles. Anastasia's eyes widened as she took in the sheer number of participants, many glaring with murderous intent. She leaned toward Eftel, whispering that there seemed to be a lot of strong opponents here. Before they could even take their seats, a loud voice boomed across the arena, addressing the participants. A man appeared on stage, and a system window popped up, announcing him as Fran Bauer, a B-rank adventurer and supervisor of the first stage. He introduced himself and explained the rules. 50 participants would enter the arena at once. The goal was simple: push opponents out of the arena. Those who fell would be replaced, and the battle would continue until only 5 remained. These 5 would pass the first stage. Anything was allowed. Magic, weapons, tactics, everything counted. Fran's voice grew louder with each explanation, commanding attention. As he finished, he invited the first 50 to step into the arena. Anastasia whispered that his tone seemed cold and indifferent. Her comment caught Fran's attention, and he stopped mid-step, glaring down at her. Fear shot through the girl as she realized he had actually heard her. Without hesitation, Eftel moved in front of her, shielding her from the intimidating gaze of Bauer, making it clear that no harm would come to her on his watch. The overseer's anger flared at Anastasia's comment. He snapped that his role was to search for diamonds among the weak, that competent magicians arrived with letters of recommendation and skipped this stage entirely. Everyone standing before him now was, by definition, unworthy. Family background didn't matter, and participants should be grateful just to be allowed to take the exam. Eftel quietly registered the words, noting the tone and intent of the overseer. Von Bauer, seemingly amused, decided to toy with them. He told the pair to step into the arena, warning ominously not to do anything reckless, like leaving on their own. His laugh carried across the hall, encouraging other participants to show off. Hands shot up, voices shouted, and dozens eagerly pushed forward to enter the battlefield. Eftel grasped Anastasia's hand and led her confidently into the arena. She followed without hesitation, trusting him completely. He didn't need to worry about the fight. His focus was on keeping her safe. As soon as he saw her nervous expression, his attention shifted to their opponents, many already circling, sizing up the seemingly weak pair with poisonous interest. Other magicians moved toward them even before the battle officially began, making Anastasia shrink back in fear. She whispered that she couldn't handle close combat. Eftel's response was simple and calm. Stay behind him. Hesitant but trusting, she did exactly that, relying on his strength as the arena grew tense around them. Von Bauer announced the start of the exam, and immediately, everyone rushed to attack Eftel and Anastasia. Bauer climbed to his platform above, surveying the chaos with amusement. As a B-rank adventurer, supervising this exam was safe, easy, and well-paid, practically a vacation compared to hunting monsters. He had already glanced at over 200 participants and found none worth noting. Laughing at the idea of being paid to watch over children, he casually scanned the arena. Eftel set aside his bag, preparing for battle, while Anastasia froze, unsure what to do. The other contestants quickly closed in, aiming for the seemingly weakest targets first. Bauer mentally apologized for singling them out, but before he could process it, one mage soared overhead, landing with such force that Bauer's tablet and pen flew from his hands. Chaos erupted. Participants scattered in every direction, utterly disoriented. Eftel responded calmly, sending one opponent flying with precise technique. Within moments, 9 people were eliminated. The overseer was stunned, but quickly rationalized it. The boy was using enhanced physical charms, strengthening his legs and reflexes to overwhelm opponents. Bauer calmed himself and watched intently, realizing the other participants couldn't hope to win until they dealt with Eftel. The young mage readied his sword, anticipating the next wave. The battle royale had truly begun. Anastasia worriedly called out to Eftel, urging him to stay safe. But the young mage skillfully deflected every attack without breaking his rhythm. As he fought, he seemed to enjoy the sparring, subtly increasing his strikes and sending 5 more participants flying out of the arena. Von Bauer, observing from above, could hardly believe what he was witnessing. A swordsman of this level shouldn't exist among rank B adventurers. Yet Eftel not only defeated them effortlessly but did so while keeping Anastasia completely protected. Bauer's attention shifted as he noticed some participants targeting Anastasia, realizing they had seen Eftel shielding her. Curiosity piqued. He wondered how the young swordsman would handle protecting someone while fighting at the same time. Eftel calmly called Anastasia into action. She began chanting in a clear, confident voice. Children of the wind frolicking in the atmosphere, answer the call with your breath. Wind enslavement, level 3, silk kiss. The effect was immediate. A violent gust of wind swept through the arena, tossing the attackers aside and sending screams echoing as 16 more participants were eliminated in an instant. Bauer and the remaining contestants were stunned. Even Elcott watched in admiration as Anastasia's power became undeniable. The warden could hardly process the scene. This was not the kind of magic expected from students taking an entrance exam. The other examinees whispered among themselves, confused about why Anastasia, a seemingly timid girl, was even taking the entrance exam to the Witchcraft Academy. Hearing their comments, she blushed and instinctively looked at Eftel, feeling she might have overstepped. The young mage, however, smiled and calmly reassured her. Everything had gone exactly as he had anticipated. With a teasing grin, he asked if she truly had talent, and Anastasia, still embarrassed, quietly thanked him. Eftel then turned his attention to a pressing question of his own. He asked if casting a spell was really necessary to use magic. Anastasia hesitated, unsure how to respond, while the other participants stared dumbfounded. Even Fran Bauer looked puzzled before breaking into hysterical laughter, calling the boy a genius, or perhaps a fool, for not even understanding basic magical principles. Anastasia awkwardly explained that magic could only be summoned by casting spells, but Eftel silently shook his head, knowing the truth was far more complex. Without another word, he prepared to demonstrate. Anastasia's eyes widened as he executed a level 4 Tempest spell, Self-Depths, while simultaneously activating it with parallel magic. The effect was cataclysmic. A forceful explosion erupted, hurling most of the participants out of the Colosseum. Many couldn't even grab hold of anything, while Fren struggled to maintain his position despite being far from the epicenter. Anastasia, standing safely behind Eftel, was only slightly bewildered, her eyes reflecting pure astonishment. Watching the destruction unfold, she realized the sheer scale of Eftel's power. Doing something of that magnitude without even casting a spell was beyond anything she had imagined. At that moment, she understood that the master's skills were far superior to her expectations. At the same time, Eftel realized he might have gone a little too far. Even after unleashing such a devastating spell, Fran Bauer was still managing to lift his head. The warden's expression was a mix of shock and terror, and his disbelief was palpable. As the dust slowly settled, the true scope of the destruction became clear. Bauer's mind raced, certain that what he had just witnessed was impossible. He desperately wanted to know who these two newcomers were. Floating above the arena in stunned amazement, he barely registered Eftel's call directed at him. The man's fear was so intense that his nose began to run as he realized he was being addressed. Eftel and Anastasia calmly held up their numbers, 588 and 589, signaling their successful passage through the first stage of the exam. Bauer stammered, struggling to maintain composure, and reluctantly announced that these numbers had indeed passed. The surrounding participants, exhausted and defeated, could do nothing but watch in disbelief. Eftel felt a quiet satisfaction. They had broken through the first barrier, the initial test completed. Anastasia, despite her lingering uncertainty, stood firmly by his side, lending silent support. The knowledge that the second stage, or perhaps the final stage, awaited them tomorrow did little to shake Eftel. In his past life, he had been nicknamed the Emperor of Learning, obsessed with mastering and innovating magical theory. While he might not have been naturally gifted like other legendary figures, his relentless pursuit of new techniques, like parallel activation, had allowed him to surpass conventional limitations. He remembered the advice of the Fire Emperor. Strong magic barriers, not weak ones, were the key to survival. The young man recalled something painful, realizing that naturally talented people would always have an edge. His gaze shifted to his companion, and he wondered what Anastasia was feeling in that moment. The girl quietly asked if the exam would truly take place tomorrow. Slightly surprised by the question, Eftel confirmed her words. She sighed softly, admitting that she had been prepared all her life for the role of an obedient servant, and now the anticipation of the exam left her feeling both nervous and excited. Eftel felt genuine sympathy for her and reassured her that such worries were completely natural. Inwardly, he reflected that even without extraordinary talent, it was his responsibility to give promising individuals a chance to grow. With a bright tone, he told her that they would return to the hotel, where he would show her how to study for the exam. Anastasia's eyes widened in surprise, but Eftel's good-natured confirmation reassured her. Overjoyed, she warmly thanked her master, her hope and gratitude clear. The next day arrived swiftly. Eftel yawned loudly as he and Anastasia made their way back to the Krona Academy of Witchcraft, heading toward the location of the 456th final exam. Anastasia glanced at him with concern over his fatigue, but he waved her off, assuring her he was only slightly sleepy and everything was fine. She apologized for the long night of studying, but Eftel smiled to himself. He had barely studied in this life, yet his past experiences had prepared him well enough. At that moment, one of the academy teachers approached and placed a large stack of exam papers on Eftel's desk. The magician's eyes widened at the sheer volume of questions. Once all examinees had received their tests, another teacher formally announced that the written exam for the Krona Academy of Witchcraft had begun. Time was limited, and every novice would need to give their utmost. Eftel and Anastasia exchanged determined glances. With that, the curtain rose, and their trial officially began. The teacher announced the start of the written exam, and the room immediately filled with the scratching of quills and the murmurs of focused students. Everyone dove into the test with intensity, determined to prove their skills. Time passed, and soon the announcement came that the exam had ended. Eftel, gathering his remaining strength, leaned back and declared that he had finished. Anastasia looked at him with wide, curious eyes and asked how it had gone. The young man, exhausted but composed, replied that although the number of questions had been insane, he had managed to answer every single one. The girl blinked in surprise, asking again if he really meant every task. Eftel, a little puzzled by her reaction, confirmed that he had. After all, completing the exam was necessary. The demoness shifted awkwardly, her cheeks tinged with embarrassment. She tried to explain that it wasn't required to answer every question, since this was a free choice exam. Eftel frowned, not fully believing her words. Anastasia clarified further, pointing to the instructions on the first page that she had seen. She explained that in each of the 20 sections, it was enough to solve only the questions one could manage, and only about 30% of the entire test needed to be completed to pass. Most students would struggle with magical theory outside their specialization, which was precisely why this system existed. Eftel, however, was in a unique situation. He had the knowledge to answer everything. Finishing the entire exam wasn't necessary, but he had done it anyway, unaware of how unusual his effort had been. A sudden shout rang out from one of the academy buildings. A participant had scored 958 points, sending the teachers into a flurry of discussion. Some argued that the student must be insane, while others admitted they had never seen a score so high in all their years. Eftel's mind briefly flickered with curiosity at what the final results might reveal about him, though he remained quietly confident. Director Lucent's face flushed with indignation. He declared that nothing like this had ever happened since the founding of the academy and demanded to know who was responsible. Perhaps the boy had copied the answers or employed some other trick, he suggested, his voice laced with disbelief. The staff quickly informed him that the candidate in question was number 588, Eftel Elcott, a boy who shared the same name as the legendary Thunder Emperor. The director muttered to himself, noting that for any seeker of magic, there was nothing more audacious or potentially shameful than bearing the name of one of the 4 great emperors. Still bristling with anger, he insisted that the young man must have cheated. But before he could finish, the office doors burst open. France, breathless and apologetic, hurried in and recounted everything that had occurred during the first stage of the exam. He described the chaotic battle, the protection of Anastasia, and, most astonishingly, Eftel's use of parallel activation to cast 4th-level magic. The staff was stunned into silence. To conjure magic at the 4th level, especially through parallel activation, was already considered elite, even among academy graduates. It quickly became clear that no teacher in the institution could perform such a feat considering all the displays of power during the first exam. Eftel's perfect score could not be dismissed as a fluke. The teaching staff exchanged uneasy glances, trying to comprehend what they were witnessing. Breaking the silence, Lucent leaned on his desk, eyes narrowing, and murmured that this boy could very well be the second Thunder Emperor. A professor cautiously asked what should be done next. Lucent stroked his beard, his mind turning over the possibilities, before concluding that Eftel left an unusual impression, one that demanded careful consideration regarding his place and future in the academy. The day of the exam results had arrived. The pair made their way to the boards, but the throngs of people pressing around them made it nearly impossible to see anything. Eftel suggested they split up to cover more ground, and Anastasia readily agreed. With bated breath, he scanned every list he could reach, eyes darting across names. Suddenly, a flurry of movement caught his attention. Anastasia came rushing toward him, tears in her eyes and her voice trembling with excitement. She pointed frantically at one of the lists, and the magician realized she had found her name. She had been placed in a special class. Eftel followed her gesture and saw the words clearly, Special Class Number 589, Anastasia. She clung to him in her joy, and onlookers mistakenly assumed the two were an inseparable pair. Hearing the murmurs around them, Anastasia blushed deeply and quickly apologized, explaining that her reaction was simply from excitement. Eftel smiled gently and reassured her that everything was fine. He congratulated her warmly, noting that passing the exam meant she could now live as a normal student, free from the burdens of her past. The girl thanked him shyly for his guidance during her training, her gratitude evident in the soft way she lowered her gaze. Turning back to the boards, Eftel began searching for his own number with keen interest. But as he moved from list to list, a creeping unease settled over him. No matter how many boards he checked, his name was nowhere to be found. Confusion gave way to frustration. He was certain he had passed the exam, yet the results told a different story. Anastasia noticed his troubled expression and asked softly what had happened. Eftel, still scanning the lists, admitted with a frown that he couldn't find his number anywhere. The girl's face mirrored his concern, whispering that the situation seemed strange. Internally, Eftel wondered if he had overdone it in the arena, or perhaps his magical abilities had been measured without his knowledge. Some unseen factor that had somehow caused him to fail. Anastasia quickly turned to him, her expression serious, insisting that such a situation was completely unacceptable and that she intended to file a complaint. Eftel shook his head, gently telling her it wasn't worth making a fuss. Doing so would only complicate matters, and right now, everything was fine. Suddenly, the girl froze, her gaze fixed on something unusual. Eftel leaned closer, curious, and asked what she had found. Her finger pointed to a column on the board. Candidate number 588, Eftel Elcott, had achieved first place in the written examination. He was listed as a representative of special students. Anastasia's eyes widened at the phrase special student, while Eftel barely had time to process it before realizing he had indeed passed, with top marks. The girl looked at him, beaming, and said that she expected nothing less from him than a result of special distinction. Eftel hesitated, a faint tension tugging at his satisfaction. He was pleased to have passed, but a knot of concern formed in his chest. Special student representative, what exactly did that entail, and what duties would now be expected of him? Anastasia noticed the other students who had already been enrolled and suggested they move on. She added with excitement that special students apparently enjoyed unique benefits. Exemption from basic education, a special allowance, the role of student representative, participation in internal events on equal footing with teachers, and even representing the academy publicly at kingdom events. Eftel's initial relief gave way to exasperation. This wasn't what he had envisioned. He had imagined sneaking into the library after class, studying in secret, and making breakthroughs in magical theory. He had pictured an ideal student life focused entirely on honing his abilities. Instead, he realized, his new status as a special student came with obligations that might prevent him from pursuing the quiet, independent path he had hoped for. The privileges that made him special also tied him to responsibilities he had never wanted to bear. Suddenly, Eftel's thoughts were interrupted by a surprising sight. An adult demoness was walking down the corridor, flanked by two teachers. The magician froze, eyes widening in disbelief. He quickly ducked behind a column, his mind racing. Merlin. The sight of her left him stunned. While Eftel hid, he watched carefully as the teachers escorted her somewhere unknown. He peered out just enough to confirm he hadn't imagined it. The demoness had grown, yet her features remained unmistakably familiar. It was indeed Merlin. In that instant, he realized that if Merlin, who had known him in his past life, were to look at him now, she would immediately recognize the resemblance and understand who he truly was. Eftel's mind raced. This was not the right moment for such a revelation. If the reincarnation of one of the 4 emperors were to be exposed in front of someone like her, the consequences could be disastrous. He turned to Anastasia, trying to redirect the situation, and suggested showing her the academy from the inside, deliberately pointing in the opposite direction of Merlin. The girl hesitated but agreed cautiously. At that moment, Merlin shivered unexpectedly, a strange sensation crawling over her skin. She felt a presence, a masterful aura, somewhere nearby. Turning sharply, guided by instinct, she found no one at first and felt a pang of disappointment. But then her eyes fell on the young man hastily hiding behind the column. Recognition struck instantly, and she rushed toward him, calling out for him to stop. Eftel braced himself, caught off guard as Merlin suddenly appeared in front of him. The proximity confused him. The demoness seemed uncertain, not knowing how to address him, while Eftel's thoughts whirled with concern, disappointed that he could no longer remain unseen. Finally, Merlin, gathering herself, spoke with surprising confidence despite a hint of embarrassment. She asked directly if the young man had any connection with the Thunder Emperor. Eftel hesitated, panic creeping in as he realized Merlin had sensed something. His mind raced. Now that he had been accepted into the academy, it would be disastrous if any slip led to his expulsion. He muttered in confusion, barely understanding the situation, and silently apologized to Merlin for the chaos. Then, a sudden idea struck him, and he exclaimed that he was very hungry. Anastasia blinked in confusion, unsure what had prompted such an impulse. Before she could react, the magician had grabbed her hand and cheerfully declared it was time for lunch. She hesitated again, asking anxiously about registration, but Eftel quickly assured her that they would handle that afterward. Merlin, sensing their movement, called out to them, demanding that they wait. Anastasia watched Eftel leave, her mind uneasy at the unfolding scene. Meanwhile, the protagonist was surprised to learn that his companion did not recognize Merlin. Sheepishly, Anastasia admitted that she had never met her relative in person and had no idea who she truly was. This revelation eased some of Eftel's tension. Since it was Anastasia's first encounter with Merlin, they had avoided a direct conversation that might have revealed too much. He could almost imagine the dialogue that would have unfolded between his former and current companions, a conversation he would have struggled to control. Eftel recalled the lineage. Merlin was the daughter of the Demon King. Anastasia, recalling family stories, explained that 10 generations ago, the head of her family had been the Demon King himself, which meant she and Merlin were distant relatives. The magician's surprise was genuine, but now it made sense why they had acted like strangers. The events of 10 generations ago were unimaginably distant. Eftel's mind raced as he observed Merlin, noting silently that she was nothing like Anastasia. Yet her presence was far more pressing than appearances. Why was she here? As the head of the prestigious Altina Witchcraft Academy, her appearance at Krona Witchcraft Academy filled him with anxiety. The thought that she might have come to teach here made his stomach twist, and he silently prayed it wasn't true. Despite his worry, he and Anastasia attended the academy for the first time as students. Once all the first years had gathered, the principal began the introductory speech. He congratulated everyone on their enrollment in the renowned Krona Academy of Witchcraft, welcoming special class students, honorary students, general classes, and gifted prodigies alike. Though each student had a different path, Principal Lucent urged them to study diligently and follow the shared path of witchcraft. Today was further distinguished by a special honor. Master Merlin, having overcome countless barriers to become the head of Altina, had come to visit the first years. Excitement rippled through the students at the sight of the legendary figure. Anastasia's eyes widened in surprise, while Eftel felt a deep tension coil in his chest. Merlin stepped forward, introducing herself and congratulating the students, and her presence only heightened his nervous anticipation. As she spoke, Eftel's mind worked furiously to discern the reason for her visit. Relief washed over him when he realized she wasn't here to teach at his academy, but he knew he needed to act carefully once the ceremony concluded, before any serious complications arose. Just as he exhaled, the director announced that a representative of the incoming class would give a speech. It was a special student, Eftel Elcott. Hearing his name, a cold dread sank into him. Merlin returned to her seat, watching as a student bearing the same name as him stepped forward. Panic surged through Eftel, and he timidly raised his hand, fully aware that he was walking into a potentially disastrous situation. Eftel realized the situation was far worse than he had imagined. If Merlin knew everything now, she would see through it instantly. Some of the students didn't know him personally, but even they were unsettled by the mere fact that Eftel Elcott shared the name of the legendary Thunder Emperor. Whispers about his unprecedented written exam score and the destruction he caused in the arena had already spread. The protagonist felt a deep unease, desperate to prevent anyone from inadvertently revealing these details to Merlin. Anastasia glared at him, her eyes silently scolding him, and he inwardly wished he could escape the stage right then and there. Yet he stepped forward and delivered a brief, composed speech, putting an end to the enrollment ceremony. Afterward, Eftel slumped over his desk, head resting wearily on his arms, replaying the tense moments of the ceremony. Slowly lifting his gaze, he noticed a crowd of enchanted girls surrounding him, each vying for his attention. Anastasia, standing nearby, felt a pang of resentment, thinking with quiet irritation that she had been the first to find her master. Suddenly, Merlin burst into the classroom, and the students froze in shock. She placed a stack of papers on Eftel's desk, stating that she had heard a great deal about him. The girls, initially indignant at the newcomer's familiarity, quickly recognized her authority and hurriedly apologized before scattering in fear. Merlin's gaze lingered, stern and commanding, making the classroom tense and silent. Eftel, observing her closely, recalled memories of Merlin as a child and realized how much she had grown. Stern, formidable, and unwavering. With his silent permission, Anastasia began to call out to Eftel. There was no need for introductions. He already knew her name, and the path to conversation with Merlin had begun. Merlin spoke awkwardly, but with a piercing curiosity, asking if Eftel knew the meaning of the word reincarnation. The boy froze, caught off guard by the precision of her insight. His former student, always perceptive, had suddenly hit the mark with unnerving accuracy. Elcott feigned ignorance, pretending not to understand what she meant, but Merlin was prepared. She had already studied his exam results. The scores were astonishing, as if one of the 4 great emperors had taken the test for amusement. Most of the Academy's teachers could not even comprehend the reasoning behind his answers. Merlin's gaze sharpened as she asked him defiantly whether he understood the reason behind it. Confused, Eftel admitted he did not. Merlin calmly stated that his exam aligned perfectly with magical theories from 4 centuries ago. Some nearby students had begun to eavesdrop, intrigued by the intensity of their exchange, but Merlin ignored them, focused entirely on Eftel. The magician stalled, buying time with vague words, though he already understood the truth in his mind. He hadn't accounted for the centuries of difference. All the questions had seemed simple because he knew the foundations of magic far too well. Observing him now, Merlin seemed to reconcile the resemblance she felt, a connection to someone from her past. Quietly, she admitted that the person he mirrored had been dear to her. The confession left Eftel momentarily stunned. Merlin, noticing his surprise, quickly apologized for her words, clarifying that she had only suspected a connection to her master and had been hasty in using the term reincarnation. She added that Eftel undoubtedly had some link to the great Thunder Emperor. Turning her gaze to him as he instinctively avoided her eyes, she guessed that his hesitation was due to the weight of that connection, though it remained only her assumption. Eftel finally confirmed it, acknowledging the truth. Merlin had seen correctly. He was indeed the reincarnation of the great emperor.